Alright, this is The Lord is One with my next video on Christian unity. This is again on the section of Are Catholics Christian, and this will deal with faith and works. And so, I think the issue here is a very misunderstanding on both sides. And we're going to go through like two of the main proof texts, which are used on either side to show the position. We're going to show how both Catholics and Protestants are a lot closer than you would think, and also how these different texts are closer than you would think. And then we're also going to quote a specific part of Catholic doctrine to show that this is indeed the Catholic position. So, basically here, Protestants believe in faith apart from works, and, and Catholics are said to believe in faith and works are necessary, but the thing is here is that each side, when they hear the other side, they hear something different than what is actually being taught. When Catholics hear Protestants say they need faith apart from works, what the Catholic hears is that you can sin as much as you want, and you can just ask for forgiveness at the end of the day and you'll still be a Christian. What a Protestant hears when a Catholic says you need faith and works, or you need works to show that you're a Christian, what a Protestant hears by that is they hear that it's a work-based theology. That's what they hear. But of course, I've spoken to Catholics. I know that this is not their position, and I know that Protestants, this is not their position. There's no really official Protestant doctrine I can really quote from you. But I can quote these biblical passages, so let's just talk about these main two passages. First, this is the passage commonly used by Protestants as sort of a proof text for what they're saying. Let's read the entire passage rather than just, read this one verse. And let's see what it actually says. So we'll start with verse 28 in Romans chapter 3. Therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith apart from the deeds of the law. Or is he the God of the Jews only? Is he not also the God of the Gentiles? Yes, the God of the Gentiles also, since there is one God who will justify the circumcised by faith and the uncircumcised by faith. And so you can see here, by the way, that he's speaking of the law of the Old Testament, not necessarily of any law of any kind. But this is important. But anyway, he'll continue. Do we then make void the law through faith? Certainly not. On the contrary, we establish the law. So what he's saying here is that if you're a true Christian, the law is established through faith. Meaning, what is faith? Faith is a form of trust you put in God. But if you really trust God, then when God tells you to love your neighbor as yourself, you're going to take that commandment seriously. Thus, you establish the law, or at least certain parts of the law, in regards to what was commanded to the Gentiles. And you take that law, and you accept it as what you as a commandment. What Paul is not saying here is that the law is made, that all the law is made void through faith. He clearly dismisses this claim because, he goes through this and he's raising a common objection. Now, the reason Paul focuses on this aspect, Paul focuses on the importance of faith, is because he's dealing with people who focus on law. Thus, when you hear someone who focuses on law, you need to talk about why faith is important. But here's a second part. This next thing is commonly used as proof text for that Catholics use, and this is from James chapter 2. Anyway, the main phrase here, faith does not have works is dead. If that also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Now, but what's the very next verse say? But someone will say, you have faith, and I have works. Show me your faith without works, and I will show you my faith by my works. So he's saying that it's impossible to really have faith if you're not showing an outward projection of works. Meaning that if you say you believe in God, say you believe in Jesus and the Trinity and the resurrection, but you're not changed as a Christian, then you haven't really accepted Christ at that point. You haven't accepted him into your heart. And this is all that is being said here, and I've heard several Protestants say this, but again, if we look at these texts, which are typically used by either side to prove their case, but we actually read them through, we realize that these texts are saying much the same thing, except James here is responding to someone who focuses on faith, whereas Paul is focusing on someone who focuses on works. Focuses on works and thinks that works are all you need. He's focusing on someone who says they have faith, but doesn't have an outward projection of that faith. And so understanding the connection between these two passages is important. But then as a final note here, Protestants often point to the Council of Trent as one of the worst things that Catholics have put out. But the Council of Trent actually agrees with this. And let me show you. This is from the Council of Trent, and you can see it's from Canon 6, Chapter 7. And it says, this disposition, or predation, is followed up by justification itself, which is not the remission of sins merely, but also the sanctification and renewal of the inward man through the voluntary reception of the grace and the gifts. So notice, it's an acceptance or voluntary reception of grace. That's what justification is. You are justified by grace, according to the Council of Trent, whereby a man of unjust becomes just, and an enemy a friend. That is so that he may be an heir according to the hope of life everlasting. So it's saying that we are justified by grace, but that justification can turn an unjust man into a just man, and give the renewal, as it says, of the inward man. So the message of Catholicism, and I would say of Protestants as well, is that a man is ultimately justified through grace by God, but that grace creates an inward renewal of man. As Paul said, the faith, establishes the law. As James said, he shows you his faith by his works. And that's what we need to remember. And I think it's very important for Christians to understand this, because this is truly what the Bible teaches. And ultimately, if you have a Christian who is familiar with these passages, who has read through these passages, even if they've just read a single verse, in order to reconcile James 2:17 with Romans 3:28, they have to use this argument. But of course, if you read both passages, they're both saying roughly the same thing, but focusing on different objections. And so, I thank you for watching, and God bless.